I just gotta make it through turn one, not end up off to the left here. I got Paul Newman in my rearview mirror. And I think Hurley Haywood just hit me. Alright, the AI is especially tentative in the first lap. My goal is going to be not to stay off track and not to punt one of these guys off. Like here, going through the snake, I found the AI to be particularly timid. Once I get to the back straight, I'll tell you why I'm even doing this race. Headed towards the famous oak tree corner that no longer has an oak tree. So I've wanted to do this race here at Virginia International Raceway ever since Microsoft announced they were releasing this Cadillac as part of it, the Car Pass DLC. This does not seem the most obvious choice for a DLC car. And to me, it just tells me that there are some people at Turn 10 Studios who are putting this game together and have a real love of racing. By name, this is a Cadillac CTS-V Coupe Trans Am car. But I know it as, and I am racing it here, as a GT-1 car. Let me explain the Sports Car Club of America, for those who may not be familiar with it. The SCCA, you may be familiar with it. They started the Trans Am series back in the 60s, and then a little while later the Can-Am series, among other series. So you have the Sports Car Club of America Pro Racing, which actually still sanctions the Trans Am series. However, the SCCA is also one of the largest organizers of amateur racing in America. Now, being amateur racing, you have all different classes of vehicles, from humble little touring cars, small open wheel cars, to powerful prototypes and powerful GT cars, these being the top of the heap. In the SCCA, this is the GT-1 class. If you go to a regional race weekend and you see the different run groups, this class would be the ground pounders. And essentially, you can go to an amateur race and see Trans Am machinery. Now, with the SCCA being an amateur organization set up in regions all across the country, I myself am a member of the New England region. Every region has championships and they have winners in each class. The SCCA gathers all the champions, and they have since the late 60s, early 70s, when it was called the American Road Race of Champions, or Road Race Championship. They gather all the champions and the top runners in each class and have the runoffs, the SCCA runoffs. It's usually in some central location, which unfortunately at times isn't too central in the big United States. The last 2 years, 22 and 23, the runoffs have been held at Virginia International Raceway, where we are. And unfortunately, last year, 2023, was not a good one for GT1s. As you can imagine, it's a pretty expensive class to race in. It's pro-level machinery. car counts are usually pretty low in our region. Unfortunately, car counts are low in many regions. And for the runoffs last year, we only had 7 entries on the official entry list. And as there's 3 days of qualifying on top of 2 days of testing, and through the course of testing and qualifying, several cars had mechanical issues and had to essentially withdraw from the runoffs for the rest of the week, which is super unfortunate. And with the runners who could run, essentially they would be racing around this giant circuit with 4 cars. So instead of taking a 1-hour racing slot in the runoffs weekend, the competitors essentially said, we're going to bag it, pack up and go home. Not worth it, essentially. So the GT-1 championship did not get run in 2023. So this race didn't happen, but I want to see it happen. I want to see these cars on this track. So here I am in a GT1, and when you get to the runoffs, they don't run multi-class racing like you would on a regional level. Each class gets its own race, which is why only having 4 cars in a race didn't make sense. Especially the runoffs, you have 23 races, 26 races to run, 1 for each class. Time is a valuable commodity. I don't know why these cars are slowing down so much. It's almost like there's a caution that I didn't know about. So hopefully I can do this race proudly. I started back in 14th position, which was last. I did actually set this up to be a multi-class race, if only to get maybe a little bit of lapping later in the event. I have the GTX class as the other class, which, as being retired IMSA racers from the 80s and 90s, I think it would really provide a good flavor of what you would see in a ground pounder class. So started 14th. I would love to make it up to the podium, but I got to keep it clean. I already got 1 avoidable contact warning, which I have no idea what I did. But at the very least, there's always an award called the Hard Charger Award in these runoff races, and it goes to the racer who gained the most positions during the course of the race. So starting 14th, I'm up to 9th. That's a possibility. VIR, pardon, I'm gonna admit, is not my favorite track. I've never been able to find the rhythm. And the penalty for little mistakes is big, especially at this corner, hog pen. If you go off to driver's left, you're going for a ride. The grass is always slippery, and it seems like once you leave the track surface here at VIR, you are headed for the walls. It's all downhill once you get off the tarmac. So you get on slippery grass and you slide towards tires, or you slide towards Armco. And even if you manage to not crush your car, it's always a long way back onto the racing surface. Hey, upgraded my car. Woohoo. Last year there was a massive Spec Miata crash right about here. Car went into the bridge abutment. Driver was okay. I need to start making some hay against these challengers. This is another example of why I believe Turn 10 Studios takes care of American auto racing. I have a full class of GT-1 cars, essentially. They had the game released with the Corvette, the C7 Stingray Trans Am car. As part of the car pass, you could get the Challenger GT1 / Trans Am car ahead of me. They released this Cadillac GT1 Trans Am car. And between releasing that car and me filming this, they released the Ford Mustang Trans Am competitor. So you have 4 different cars you can choose from to do your own GT1 / Trans Am championship. And they are fun. And behind me in the GTX class, you have a ton of cars that are, you know, very famous in American endurance racing, American sports car racing, like, believe it or not, a Dodge Somerset, or a Buick Somerset, which I'll have more footage on later. You have Paul Newman's GTO Nissan Turbo, which was also a Trans Am competitor at one time. However, it's classed as GTX because it just wouldn't be able to compete with these modern Trans Am cars. I cannot make any inroads on these guys, but I can still see the leaders, so I'm gonna push. So I can't say there's much difference between GT1 and Trans Am. Currently, Trans Am cars race on Pirelli tires, but I think you have more freedom in GT1, and most amateur racers will race Hoosier tires. Or Hoosier provides a lot of support to amateur racers. Oh boy. Make sure I don't get a penalty there. All right. Now this car, this star-spangled Cadillac CTS V, is not actually a Cadillac. It just pretends to be one in races. The car was built by a guy named Tony Ave, or Tony Ave's race shop. I know Tony Ave from watching Trans Am in the 2000s, early 2000s. He was a regular competitor. I did not know that he was a former open wheel guy until he had a big injury in Indy Lights or Formula Atlantic. But this is a Tony Ave chassis, originally built as a Corvette. It was sold to David Pintarek, who he thought that the CTS-V bodywork might actually be a little bit more aerodynamic. The original Corvette bodywork was actually sold and put on one of Amy Ruman's Corvette Trans Am cars. And if you don't know Amy Ruman, she became the first female Trans Am champion. And her car is in Forza Motorsport. I believe it's painted as it was. The default skin is as it was when she won her title. So this car was... Oh, let me see if I can get this guy without causing too much issue. All right. Now, I don't want to throw it away here. I got 6 laps to go. 6 cars to go. The exit out of turn 1 here is just a blast. You're a little bit sideways. And then this area of the track is just so busy. Locking up the rear brakes a little bit to get the car turned. So this car did race in Trans Am, not just amateur racing, and I believe David won at Daytona in 2019. Oh, I'm so tempted to dive underneath this guy here. So unfortunately, because this car doesn't have any Cadillac parts, it's not registered as a Cadillac, and as a race car, it exists in the in the Corvette registry. Well, this guy's really getting on my nerves. It seems like the artificial intelligence in Forza Motorsports, the cars are really timid when they're in front of you and extremely aggressive when they're behind you. So, as I mentioned, David Pintark won in this car at Daytona in 2019. It debuted as a Trans Am car in the hands of 2-time Trans Am champion. I think it's 2-time. It could be 3-time. Chris Dyson, second generation Dyson racer. On its debut at Watkins Glen, the car was doing pretty well. It was as high as 5th place, and then I believe it tangled with a slower car, ended up retiring. Now the 2 cars ahead of me are kind of oddballs that I could not filter out of Forza Motorsports with the rules that you have. These are KTM Expo GT2 cars, coupes. Oh, they're pretty fast. Oh, look at that nice Dale Earnhardt liveried Corvette up there. That's gonna be fun. So here I am in the runoffs, trying to win in this car, which this car has. This Cadillac has raced in the runoffs before, and at Virginia. The runoffs, I believe this is the 3rd. Last year would have been the 3rd runoffs at VIR. They were here in 2019. Got a shortcut. I want to say this car was 3rd in that 2019 runoffs with David Pintark at the wheel. When the runoffs came back in 2022, oh, I'm going for it. Ooh. When they were back in 2022, unfortunately, I think it was Hurricane Irma. There was a hurricane that was coming through the East Coast, and the whole runoffs weekend was just a complete washout. There was so much rain. So in that wet, dry race, David, it was able to bring this car home 5th. Don't feel too bad for David, though. It's not like he's snake bit. When the runoffs were actually run on the road course at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, your GT-1 Runoffs champion, national champion we call him, was David Pintark in this Cadillac. Now last year, had the runoffs race been run, it would not have had this car in it, because David has since switched to a similarly colored Ford Mustang. So if you did put this paint job on the Ford Mustang that Forza Motorsports has just included, you could still race as David Pintark. This year, I believe the runoffs are returning to Road America in Wisconsin. So you could emulate that race in Forza Motorsports. Oh. Within sight of a podium here. 3 laps to go. I have really grown to love this car and this class of cars in Forza Motorsports. When I first started testing these cars, it was just such a handful. I've made some setup changes. I'm not big on changing setups too much because, quite frankly, I just don't have the time to do the methodical setup changes that you really need to do to get effective results. But many, many, many laps at VIR and other classic North American tracks. I like to race these on Mid-Ohio, which is one of my bucket list tracks. Road America, Daytona. I would love for there to be a Sebring in Forza Motorsports. I expect there to be a Sebring at some point, since it was in Forza Motorsport 7. But the car has some of the issues, the Forza Motorsports issues, namely the braking. Getting my handle on the braking has been a challenge. Seems like you really need to be sensitive on the braking. This car would be a fully analog car, and if you talk to anybody who races these cars now, this is why they love this class. It's classic American road racing. You got a giant 850 horsepower V8 in the front, rear-wheel drive, massively wide racing slicks, no traction control, no anti-lock brakes. I don't think I can keep up. So this is a fully beefy, brawny experience. One good thing about this car in game here is it really feels like you feel the weight of the car. I mean, these are purpose-built race cars, tube-frame chassis, fiberglass bodywork, fairly big rear wings, some decent front-end aerodynamics. But they're big cars. They're big, they're heavy, they're proper. All right, I think we're finally starting to see some lap traffic. I had a better chance there. I didn't want to... This is not the place. I'm letting 5th place come back. Unless it were lap traffic in the runoffs, you would not have a different class car interfering with the race like it is here. We've got a, I think it's a 550 horsepower Buick Somerset. Former Trans Am car, actually won. Oh, I'm going for it. Ooh, nope, I'm not going for it. All right, this is getting dicey. This is the difference between an old Trans Am car and a more modern Trans Am car, which the Buick Somerset was a 87, 88 Trans Am machine. Oh. Ooh. Okay, for some reason, Dale threw the anchor out there.
Last lap, let's go.
Whew. Woed that down just in time. This guy is a problem. All right, I am within... I gotta believe I'm gonna get the Hard Charger award, going from 14th to 2nd. And if this guy continues to throw a pick, the Somerset continues to throw a pick, I'm gonna get this leader here. That's not good. All right. I think I got off lightly from the penalty system by not taking advantage. Okay. Good exit here. See if I can drag by this guy. That was a good exit. And then hopefully I don't stumble on the Buick myself, which we should be catching him just as we get to the roller coaster. Oh, perfect pick. Wow. Navigate the roller coaster. Hog pen one last time. Well, I gotta say, that lap car definitely helped me out there. Because I'm gonna win the runoffs. The race that never was.